So, good morning to you all. Obviously, we've just introduced ourselves, but let's just go back around that again. So, I'm Karl Evans, work for Rolls-Royce, been working at Rolls-Royce just over 25 years. Previous to that, automotive industry. Previous to that, machine tool business. And then right at the beginning of my career, I worked in an aerospace company in a town called Warwick with just over 100 employees. And I started my life as an apprentice production engineer. And one of the best things that ever happened there was they insisted if I'm going to instruct people and plan how we make parts, I had to be a tool maker. So I had to qualify as a tool maker at the same time. To me, that makes me feel I started life off with just some damn good grounded roots about engineering. The other thing also, if I reflect on stats yesterday, I believe 1 in 5 of you in the room are in an organisation less than 200 people. So, firstly, I think everybody else should give you a round of applause because that means you being here is a big resource absence in your business compared with all the other ones which are much bigger. So that's a starter. We'd like to give a round of applause to everybody of less than 200. Pete, do you want to just say it before we start?
Yeah, well, again, good morning. Good morning, everybody. Pete Teti, I'm in my 40th year in aerospace manufacturing, 27 at Collins Aerospace. Previously, that was Hamilton Sundstrand. And last 13 at Pratt Whitney. I'm currently a senior technical fellow for quality engineering. But I spent, in my career, I started off as a machinist, went to 4 years in a trade school, a machine tool and die, and started off as a manufacturing engineer. That's where I kind of cut my teeth, I guess you could say. And I've been in quality now since the mid-90s. It's been very rewarding. And I spent 10 years as a supplier quality and development manager, which is probably the thing I absolutely love the most is working with suppliers and trying to help them, circulate through these shark-infested waters. And hopefully we're helping here this week with this conference. So I'm going to now turn it back. And I got to say, I had the pleasure to work with Karl in putting this particular theme together. This is a good one. APQP and how it interacts with the reference manuals. It's really came out of the Troll Hot in Sweden conference. So Karl's taken the lead to really pull this together. I think you're going to really find a lot of value in this presentation. Thanks, Karl.
Thank you for setting expectations so high. So, look, the objective here is we want to start by talking about APQP, bring some thoughts into your minds, and lead into the SMIG sessions. Now, there's a number of, we'll go through the details of how they're going to work when we get to that point. But what we want to do is give you some pre-thoughts to when you get into the SMIG sessions about how they start connecting to APQP. So that's kind of our objective. We've called this Spotlight and APQP, and then we're going to lead into these one-to-ones with the SMIGs groups themselves. However, before we get into it, it's really useful to get some facts. I like facts. I've already given you that idea that I like facts. I've just talked about 1 in 4 people and 2 in 3 being in the room. So let's just start with, if you wouldn't mind, you can see on the Slido, you've got the hang of this. You've had lots of practicing over the last 24 hours or so. And if you could just put some facts in about what organisation type you represent. And we just get a view in the room, first of all. So it's looking like design and manufacture is just under half, make to print a third. I'm quite surprised, actually. If you asked me to put a bet on, I would not have put that ratios in. However, this is what the point I'm asking for. So at this point, hold the thought that 45% of the audience are representing design and manufacturing organisations. I will come back to that percentage in a bit. Next bit of data collection. Now, this, if I remember right, actually came at the end of yesterday, but it was actually shown really quickly. I didn't get a chance to jot down the figures. But if you would just answer this one, the point is, if you think now and the next 6 months, what type of engineering change do you see your business dealing with? 3 options. Is it around a new product coming into your business, as in a new design or a design to that product? So the engineering design of products, is that a driver for some of the change? Is it that you're looking at transferring from one facility to another? Or the other one is the actual manufacturing method itself, and new methods, changes to methods. And that's the way to read this, is what we're looking for. So if I look at those stats, the figure I want you to hold in your mind is manufacturing methods and transfers. It's looking, interestingly, the way percentages are working, that a significant part of what's coming on the horizon, and I know why the percentages aren't adding up to 100%, is the way the question's been pitched. But you're saying that a significant amount of activities over the next 6 months is to do with the manufacturing method and transfers from facilities. So hold that in your thought. So what are we going to cover? So the bit I'm going to start with on APQP is just to talk about the when. So when does APQP take place? Then move on to the what. And when I say the what proportion of APQP is used is expected. And then get to the who, which there seemed to be the last question seemed to be getting into this from the panel side of things, questions, answers we had. And then that's teeing up to get into the how. When we talk about the how, we want to do it in the SMIG groups. And it will make more sense when we get to the how bit, how we're going to do that, because of what I introduced from the when and the what and the who. So I'm not going to come here, I'm not going to attempt now to tell you exactly what to do in your business now, but I'm going to stir things up to make you think about what you could do in your business. When we get into hows, there's the various SMIG groups, we'll introduce who they are. There's also the one on APQP, and we can dive into that as well on the APQP one. So, back to Slido. Now, this is a straight quiz for you. What we're going to do is be asking 3 questions, and what I'd like you to do is you could answer those 3 questions, and it's in regards to AS 13100, specifically to APQP, and I'm slightly distracted because what I should have told you is elect to enable a number for your table and pick chat in, but don't worry about that. So you're all entering your names in, and what I'd like you to do is just answer the 3 questions that are posed to you when you go into the actual quiz itself. Now, the quiz is on a timer. So you only have so long for each question to answer the question, actually in the Slido, but we're going to give it a go. So it looks like there's not much more happening in terms of names, or there could be some more names. Okay. I like the way someone's put your name in. They actually follow the instruction. It does say input your name, so that's very diligent. Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, that's good. It's good fun. Okay, so we're going to have some questions. So the first one is, so in accordance to 13100, does new product introduction require the application of APQP? It is on a timer. Don't feel under pressure, but you've only got 17 seconds left. The counter's going down. We're getting near to 10 seconds. It's a simple one. It's a yes or no. There's no maybe. And the result is, as you can see. So there's a pocket of you which are believing it's not, and there is a significant pocket of you which is believing it's yes. So let's move on to the next one. So that was new product introduction. And if you remember the stats, we were looking at over the next 6 months, round about, it looked realistically, about a third of you will be dealing with new product introduction. So let's move on to the next one. You can see there's the yes answer. So next question, and it is on a timer. It relates to the transfer of product from one facility to another, and is it a requirement for the application of APQP? Again, there's no pressure at all. It's only 15 seconds left though. The last few seconds to give your answer. The hint is it's either yes or no. Brilliant, right. So, we have a strong view that yes it is. However, there's a smaller view which says no it's not. Final question. And by the way, the answer is yes, it is. Final question then. So, in accordance to AS 13100, when a quality escape occurs and 8D is conducted, is the application of APQP required? Okay, we're coming down to the last 10 seconds now. The results are interesting. Oh, okay. Congratulations, everyone who said no, it's not. So, now there's a little bit of a league table. Well done, those names who are coming up. If I instructed you correctly and said, please elect a name for your table and commonly all put it in, we could have got this to work as a table competition. However, I failed to do that. So let's just touch on those, right? So let's be clear, in terms of AS 13100 and the application of APQP, it is a requirement for new product introduction, and that refers to new designs or changes to designs is a way of looking at that, and also transfers from one facility to the other. And why is that? Why are we wanting that? Because it is a structured approach to managing engineering change or product or processes. And what's APQP doing is giving you a framework to operate in. And what it's ultimately doing is a way of looking at it, is it sets the standard. So we set the standard for the product, set the standard for the manufacturing process, set the standard for the facility, is what it's doing. So, why is the third question a no? And the reason is that actually 8D is the framework, but it's correcting. It's dealing with a problem, and it's a resolution framework. And what it's ultimately doing is returning to standard. Okay, so key thing is, what's the expectation when we talk about new product introduction and we're talking about transfers from one facility that there is the application of APQP. So let's focus on that. So there is a set of words in AS 13100. I like pictures. You might have picked up from the comments of some of the presenters over the last day, I like animation as well. They all take the mick out of me for this, but I believe a picture speaks 1,000 words. So on that messaging I just gave you, the other bit, which is about applicability, is actually it's applicable to new processes, in the introduction of new processes or changing processes, unless they're negligible. Now, there's a definition around negligible. We can talk about it in the SMIG session. More than happy to go into that. I won't touch that now. What I want you to think about now is the question I asked you earlier, which was, in the next 6 months, And it was in relation to you dealing with new designs or transfers and processes. And what you were saying was, it felt like 2/3 of you will be dealing with process changes or new processes or transfers in the next 6 months. The reason I'm bringing that up is, and I want you to think about this, that your organisation's learning of a subject is your advantage. Another way of looking at it is, how good you get at APQP will be a strategic advantage to you as a business, because what it delivers, as we've been describing over the last day or so, is that it's going to drive things like zero defects. It's going to build quality into the process, into the product. It's going to ensure that those first parts are right and troublesome free. And if you think about that, I think a lot of the drive for the application of APQP has been around new product introduction. And it's when we can start again. But there is an opportunity I want you to think about, is that it is absolutely applicable and can be done and can be run in a structured way on transfers and method change. And the reason there's a little timer on there is you think the lead time typically for those individual situations, typically MPI tends to be a long lead time, generally, when you're bringing a new product in. Yeah. If you think of transfers, it tends to be a lesser lead time than an MPI program, and even a smaller lead time is method change. Connect that with learning. Every time you go through a learning cycle, your business understands how to get this better and how to do it better and how to get it better. So the bit what I'd like you to go away is think of this not as a requirement, but an opportunity to actually learn in your business how to do this stuff better. And you can learn quicker with lower cycle times. So hopefully that sort of makes sense and that feels right, that your experiences of transfers and method changes tends to be lesser lead time to transfers, and transfers tend to be a lesser lead time to MPI. So reverse your thinking around this subject of the AS standard says it's applicable, and look at it more as an opportunity to deploy something in your business and learn by it. So that's a bit on the when. Let's talk about the what piece. So the graphic on here is, on the far right-hand side is AS 9145. I assume you've heard of that standard. It came out December 2013. The writing committee formed in 2011. I was lucky enough to be one of the people which were involved with that. It was quite a few years of really deep thinking by a lot of big companies and small enterprises, and it was pitched at aviation, aerospace, defence and space travel. So what's the connection with AS13? And AS13, the objective we came out with AS13 around the subject of APQP was to think about what helps you deploy and make this work, and is there anything we need to adapt in AS 9145 or add. So a very simple example is, if you're familiar with PPAP and the AS 13100 standards, you should know about submission levels. And submission levels is, it's probably a structured way of saying the equivalence of like Dell fares and stuff like that. It's the level of evidence that is used, and it is driven off the base of risk. It's a very simple practice. It's used in lots of industry, but that was an absence in 9145. So we thought that's a sensible thing to do. And even more importantly, to help you as suppliers have consistency of your customers around that. Going back in time, I keep bringing time in and things like this, back in 2011, 2010, I really got fed up of my job working on reactive stuff and some of the stuff which was mentioned yesterday in the proactive banner, right? I just got fed up of it because it's just boring. It's great being the firefighter and the hero, but actually it's not constructive. So I flipped over and I got a real passion for PPAP and worked heavily back in Rolls-Royce. And at the time, I know Pratt Whitney through UTC had the UTC PPAP standard coming out. So there's kind of a whole set of things were happening in the industry around the same time. The challenging bit about that was we weren't consistent on it. The principles were, but the actual execution and what was asked for wasn't. So the point I'm getting to on that is when we talk about the what AS 13100 has tried hard to do is drive better consistency in a lot of what we do. The other bit on the stack, so on the left-hand side there is a bar saying these are all requirements, and the last bit is customers have customer-specific requirements. They've shrunk massively. So I know as a fact, because I was involved with Sabre, the Rolls-Royce requirements cascade standard from the outset, all the way through. I've seen it all the way through every iteration, and I know as a fact that we've shrunk the amount of specific requirements we've asked for around the subject of APQP and PPAP over the whole years. We're asking for small additions or being clearer on some specific piece of information. If you did a line count of how much is actually written in there, it's tiny. Yeah. So when I talk about the proportion side of things, is sort of as a group of subject matter experts, it's a grand title. It's probably a group of people who really care a lot about a subject is the truth of what that title means. Is we got together early on and we thought about how can we take 9145 to another level to help the industry we're in, the supply chain, for us to be even more consistent and also alleviate the customer-specific side of things, so start standardising it. And that was the backdrop. So I want to use the word proportion of APQP now, and just think of that stack. So you as suppliers in the supply chain are faced with a stack of requirements. So the other thing what we did with around this subject was, through the RM, the reference manual, is we wanted to work on some simple principles of dismantling this stuff to a simpler level. So you've got a big stack of requirements. How can we help dismantle that? So does everyone recognise that chart? Yes, good. So the originator of this chart was in AS 9145. In excuse me, in 13100 it's identical. There's a few differences. Does anyone know what the differences are? Does anyone want to be brave enough to say yes, I know? No? Two differences. One, it's got nice jazzy colours on, what's called events. Yeah, so there's like one in the far corner, KO, and it's got a colour around it. The other one is down the bottom of those colourful buttons, there's 3 new ones compared with AS 9145. All right. So those coloured buttons I will talk about if you come and visit the SMIG stand later. I'm not going to talk about those now. I will slightly introduce them, but I'll talk to them more about those if you come and join the stand and how you can use those in your business to help. But let's talk about that stack and how we proportioned all this big layer up. So the first thing you'll find in the gold book for APQP is we refer to something called planning deliverables. Okay, and what are they? In this diagram, which works left to right, so it relates to time, left being at the start, right being at the tail end, it starts introducing the thought of what you should focus on in terms of requirements. So the first set of things we talk about is what are called planning deliverables. And that essentially a way of looking at those are the things that need to be in place by the point of you get to the button called PDR for you to have a good plan going forwards, which is resourced well and well thought through to go and execute. A lot of the stuff, when you talk to the SMIGs groups around the room later, it's all about how do you plan all that in an integrated plan. So we broke down the requirements of those, and I'll show you I'll show you the numbers in a minute. So that's the first bit. The next bit is we call something called elements, not elephants, elements. And the purpose of those, again, are things that should be delivered between the phases 2, 3, and 4. In other words, the middle ground of this timing plan, from left to right. And we even take it to another level by we actually introduce at points in time when they should be delivered. So go back to the original picture, big stack of requirements. We're now talking about breaking them down into these buckets and actually giving you a concept of when they should be complete, simplistically speaking. So the other bucket is called elements. Some of them relate to the product design activities and development. Some of it's about the process, so the manufacturing processes, the supply chain processes, and the other ones are to do with validation. You know, just validation, demonstrating it's doing what you should do. So, when I talk about the proportion, think of APQP now as a menu. And in those buckets are indicators of how many items are involved on this menu. So, we've taken that whole stack, we've dissected it, we've said there's proportions from left to right of what you have to deliver, and we're saying clearly what they are, to make it really simple in the world of what we're looking at. Now, at the moment, I've given no title to these. I'm just giving you numbers and letters. There is something on your table that looks like this. So at this point, I've been advised that engineers, which I am one as well, love looking at detail because the numbers are there and you go, and they're just set of numbers. I really now want to get into it. So again, during the SMIG sessions, you know, take this round with you and have a listen to what the SMIGs talk about, because they're going to pick some of these numbers out, and they're going to talk about those numbers and how things happen and do. But that's the first thing I want you to sort of reflect on is, what I've now presenting to you is in the pink, green, and the lighter green bucket, I've given you a list of what those things are, and in terms of illustration-wise, they're even given a hint when they start and finish. And imagine that as a template for a plan. Yeah, so right at the beginning, you know, we said, how do we show people back in the business that this stuff needs to involve everyone? This is a really good tool to do that in terms of when you do things. So that big stack of requirements have now been dissected to a number of broken up buckets of requirements, which we've broken down again, and we're telling you when they should take place. So early on in this cycle, you're looking at the black area. And one of those does equate to a plan. And the plan then would be the green, pink, and light green buckets going forwards, okay? So you start getting this thought going in your mind that so far what I've said is we've broken down the requirements into a set of buckets, and I've suggested that to learn how to do these, think about the lead times of types of change. Things like method change, transfers are far less than MPI. You know, get in there, have a go, because it's an opportunity to learn how to do it. On the how bit, I will talk more about some sort of the thoughts and what I would pitch as for your business, what to focus on in regards to that. But that's the next chunk. Just consider the gold book you see is giving you a menu of what the requirements are. And that's a way of treating it. So we're trying to do this in a simple way, not a patronising way, a simple way. Because it can be frightening, as somebody who's looked at these standards in the past and stuff, when you start with, I don't know, AS 9145, and I forget how many pages, but it's probably about 30 pages in it possibly. Maybe wrong, yeah? That's frightening to look at. So we're just trying to break these down into more easier chunks. Okay, I'll go back one. So all of those individual letters and numbers do you believe has to take place every time for MPI transfers or a method change? I'll reverse it round. Does anyone believe that they don't have to? Put your hand up. Okay, there's a bit of nervousness. I'll double the hands because like you can be a bit frightened. Put your hand up, right? So quite a lot of you think they all do. So right, take you down another bit of the journey. So menu. You've got a menu, and what I'm going to suggest is that menu does not have to apply in every situation. So again, this is about your business and your teams planning how you do APQP up front. And one of the tasks would be then to think out of that long line of letters and numbers, which we will make a connection with later when we talk about the SMIGs. And when they're talking about the detail of this, is I'm going to say that is the total amount that's available for you to use in your menu. I'm also going to say you don't have to use it all. So what's the first factor? Now, what was the figure I said for design make? Can anyone give me that? I said, remember a number right at the beginning. What was the percentage in the room? 45. Thank you very much. So let's hold that figure in it. The first thing, what influences the menu and how much is used is your organisation's type, your responsibility in this picture. So this long line, I'm going to strongly suggest that the pink area is for design and manufacture type. And those which are not design and manufacture can go, whew, the pink's not part of what we're accountable for, so there's 6 gone off the menu straight away. Now, what I'm not suggesting is it's not important to know what's going on in the pink area and those individual numbers and have information flowing down, but it's not your accountability to deliver that. So it's slimmed down already based on your organisational responsibility. Next, what could else be? Does anyone else, do you want to hazard a guess what else could be an influencer on what the number, how many of these are used? Brilliant, the change, yeah? So right at the beginning, I said, look at AS 9145 and which situations, when should it apply APQP? And that's an influencer in it as well. Now, what we've got in the actual manuals, because this can feel like, oh, cool, this is overwhelming. We've given you a sheet like that, yeah? That's going to help you plan. But what you want to know is, out of that list, what do you actually have to plan for? So you will also find in the gold books what's called application tables. And it gives these items in a list, and it maps out based on a change if it's suggesting if you should or should not be thinking about planning that. Okay, and the kind of the structure of the way it works is it starts off by going, is it a new product or new design? If yes, then it gives you a mapping of these, which ones should be used. Then the next bit is if it's a transfer, if it's yes, then it tells you, suggests which ones, and then it goes into method change. Method change, though, has a number of types of method change because it could be a negligible change, it could be a refurbishment of a tool, it could be a replacement of a tool, you could be making a change to processing, you could be introducing a new method. So there's a bit more information, but that's the decisions. And what it ends up doing is going down the list and effectively saying, if it's a new product design, definitely the pink, based on your organisational responsibility. Think about that, because if you're not responsible, then it isn't. And then it works down the list. Now, graphically, very simplistically, what ends up happening is when you go down that chain, you'll find there's less of this that is suggested to be applied. So, back to the thought of planning. What I'll now take you through is some just fundamental steps of a set of standards, AS 9145, 13100 and customer standards. We've broken that down into a menu, and we're now suggesting what on that menu is applied through some simple decisions, along with when, from left to right, they should be executed. Okay. An example on those application tables you see on screen here, this is the black ones, which are the planning, and that's what the table looks like. We also have in the manual a suggested way of thinking about planning. That's a little advert. Come along to the SMIG session, and I can talk through this, or grab me at any point during today, and I'm more than happy to just do one-on-ones and stuff. So, last bit, Who's involved in this stuff? So, we're going to go back to Slido. If you've got the Slido open. Okay, now, so the question, just on your own personal knowledge, you're offered with a list of disciplines, functional roles, and what we'd like you to do is identify one or more of them which, from your experience, should be involved in APQP. I'll give you a moment to do that. Let's see what the results are. Okay, look, scores are coming in. They're looking very, very, very even, which feels about what the expectation should be. We're posing this question to you deliberately because what we'd hope is, from your experiences, your belief is actually all those functions have a role to play, and that's an absolute truth. There isn't one function which is dominated in here. Yeah, they've all got a role to play in different capacities. Now, I could walk through and give you examples all the way, picking all these individual ones, these off, and give you an example how that function's got some involvement. That would take a long time. I'd rather give you a tool and a method for you to work that out for yourself. So we're going to be really brave now and try and use Slido, and we're going to focus on PFMEA. Don't go to the Slido yet. I don't think it will offer you the questions until I click on anyway. But what I would like you to do is think about process FMEA. Now, it was talked about yesterday, appreciating it wasn't talked into great depth. So I've got my simple guide of how you go and do a PFMEA. And the question I'm going to pose you in a minute is, what I'd like you to do is work through 4 questions that's going to be offered to you and tell me who you think is the person, or if you like, the function which is offered, which takes the lead on one of these letters. And I'll explain the letters in a moment. The first thing is, if you're not familiar with PFMEA, essentially, what do? Front end, you're going to review the product and the process, and then you're going to identify what the score, failures are, and what the scores, and then develop some mitigations. And what I want you to do is answer these questions based on that concept. Not one of those 3 steps, just generally, okay? And what I'm going to talk about or ask you is, I want you to think, and we'll walk through this model. First of all, who do you believe is accountable? And there's a bit of advice on screen when you look on the Slido. The next one, it will be asking you who's responsible. So think of the accountable and the responsible. The responsible is the person pressing play and taking the lead, and the doer. And the one accountable is, if you like, is the overarching person who should consider that it's done well. Is absolutely accountable for it. And then to do PFMEA, you need to consult with people. So think of them as giving an input, and you need to inform people. And this is what's called RACI. And the reason why RACI is useful is because in your business, you can actually take the sheet I've given you a step further and construct these back in your business as a team and start working through this model. And why is that useful? It starts enlightening the business of who needs to be involved with this stuff at what time. So we'll have a go now. If you just want to have a go then on the Slido, first of all, you'll find at the top of the screen it will be saying about accountable. Then you can scroll down, it will be talking about responsible. and then it will be talking about consult and then inform. And all what you do is just give your thoughts on who should be accountable based on the criteria given or the functions that are given, who should be responsible for PFMEA, who should be consulted, get involved, who should be informed, told about the output. Okay, shoot. Let's have a look at it then. Okay. Carry on. If you haven't done it, by all means, just keep working through the exercise. So, the view is for PFMEA, the accountable person is a program manager. I can show you an example of an answer to this on our SMIG session and stuff. I do flash one up in here. I would suggest that the person accountable for the manufacturing process and understanding the risks in that is a manufacturing engineer. Let's move on one more. Okay, so the other one is responsibility. Right. So you've homed in on responsibility, so I can understand a bit of why, with accountability, program managers coming up quality, and that may be right in your business. Not saying it's wrong. That could be right. But your homing on responsibility is definitely manufacturing engineering, followed by quality could be. Okay, so fine. Who should be consulted? Great. Look, operation, yeah. Design engineering, you need to know a bit about what's happening with the product, yeah. Quality, probably got a bucket load of knowledge about what's gone on in terms of known problems. Manufacturing again, yeah. Nobody's going from program management. Totally understand that. Nothing wrong with program managers, though. And then finally, just to sort of wrap this up is, in terms of inform, who are you going to inform? Well, you want to inform the operators, yes, absolutely. Program manager, probably yes, particularly when we talk about there's a plan, and wouldn't program management want to know how the plan's doing? And then also, MRP and stuff like that. So great. The point of doing this was just to introduce you to RACES. If you haven't seen RACES before, it is an extremely powerful tool back in your business to raise that awareness of who's involved. And it puts a really structured way of doing it. On the paper you've got in front of you, which has got on this, if you were to flip round the other side, you will see it offers you an ability to fill in a RACE for your business. And if you need copies of these to take back to your business, we can give you copies and stuff electronically and things like that. So, finally, then, let's wrap up. I've been waved at time-wise. I've been talking too much, so I will wrap up this last bit. If you come to the SMIG session for APQP, we can go into details around RACES. I will also introduce you to something called a RAPID, which is to do with those little coloured buttons, but I'll explain more about that. The point behind these things is it really embeds back in your business who should be involved. And there's nothing better than getting some leadership around a table from the different functions and working throughout RACE and let everybody have a bun fight over who's accountable and responsible and informed and needs input, because it's really informative. They can then support the plan and get the resources in place. That's why these are really powerful, even though they look simple, tools. So, finally, I feel that you may have noticed or may not have noticed I haven't said about PPAP through this journey of talking things. So my final point before I hand over to Pete, who has to talk very quickly, because I've been talking very slowly. Apologies, Pete. Is this real simple thing about PPAP, right? So what's the relationship to PPAP? Go back to that menu and the stuff in the pink and the green and light green, yeah? And you'll see on here that there's a marker saying light blue on there. All PPAP is a set of evidence. That's what it's looking for. So if you do APQP well, PPAP's an easy pass, okay?
All right, Carl, that was awesome. I learned an awful lot. In the AESQ, along with being the process control methods SMIG team lead is being the SMIG effectiveness lead, so it allows me to work with all the different subject matter interest group teams. So just to kind of really get us grounded here, subject matter interest groups basically promote the effective use of the tools that are needed within APQP. Karl talked about the 27 tasks or elements. We support a lot of those core tasks, and that's what you're going to be seeing as you go through the walkthrough. I broke this down into like 3 areas. The reference manuals are what we author and update and maintain. And these manuals, by the way, this was all modeled after automotive in the AIAG world, where they had the blue books for the automotive suppliers. Those could be quite expensive. If you're not a member of AIAG, they could be $200 a manual. Here, they're very inexpensive. They're free. And the content is excellent. They're all filled with case studies, real studies, doctored up a little bit so that to avoid any export issues, but to allow you to understand how to implement that tool. The subject matter experts are on each team. And these are folks that are doing this voluntarily in addition to their normal job, which I give them so much credit for. But they have a passion for that particular subject. It might be defect prevention tools, root cause investigations, and so forth, human factors. And so they're there to help answer supplier questions. The community of practices that we have set up in LinkedIn is a great venue for you to go on and ask questions that can be taken into the team's meetings and then answered. The teams have a regular cadence. They vary. Some meet every week, some meet every 2 weeks. We provide instructional webinars. We've had 30 webinars since 2021, and every year it's increased. We had 11 so far this year, with at least a couple more coming. And then, of course, we provide AS 13100 requirements definition, and we recommend what that text should look like for various areas. So, with that said, here we show the poster, an example of a poster that you're seeing along each of these walls. And these are the posters that show the interaction to APQP and what Karl talked about earlier. So when you go through and start talking with the SMIG team leads, they will actually point out where in APQP that reference manual and SMIG team supports. It could be over a number of different phases, or it might be just one phase and a couple of elements within that phase. He tried to simplify it by breaking it down into those 27 areas for each of the phases of APQP. So 8D, alternative inspection, measurement systems analysis. We have the zero defect core tools. That's the flow diagram, PFMEA, and control plan, RM 13004. Process control methods, and I'll be talking with you about that, and design work. So these are not all the subject matter interest groups, but the ones that really have a big impact to APQP and what Karl was talking about earlier. So we will have 4 rounds, 30 minutes per round. Then we'll take a break, and then we'll have 2 more rounds, I believe, after lunch, and that'll be 30 more minutes per round. The ones in yellow here that are highlighted are the ones that have that big impact and interaction with APQP. Questions on that? So I believe we are at the point now where we can, I don't know about that. So I think we're ready to start. Okay, so, yeah. Are some next door? Okay, so they pulled some of these out and put it into the room where we had the breakfast and the lunch, just so that we could have more room for folks, okay? So I guess with that said, we're ready to begin the walkthrough and the discussion, okay? So let's go for 30 minutes for each round.